All right, it is Friday. Welcome back to another episode of Stock Market Weekly. I am your host, Evan Medeiros. This is the show where we break down all of the important moves across financial markets through the lens of technical analysis. We've got new episodes for you every Friday evening, so make sure you tune back in, like the show, subscribe so you're up to date every weekend. Now, let's get into a remarkable week here for the stock market, of course, catalyzed by President Donald Trump taking the election and, most importantly, taking it fast, clean, and uncontested, right? These were the things that the market was very uneasy about, which was priced in, is why we saw volatility so elevated. Naturally, volatility would be elevated in front of a catalyst like this, but the big concern for markets was a drawn out contested election where we don't know the outcome for days, weeks, or even months. And we didn't get any of that. We got the cleanest, clearest result that we could basically think of, and we are seeing the market speak now. Volatility unwound. It was the big loser this week, and pretty much everything else won. S&P 500 best week in a year. The Russell 2000 was the best week for 4 years, I think the data showed. Bitcoin broke out to new highs. Tesla's ripping. The Fed also lowered interest rates 0.25%, which was basically highly anticipated. But the market is rejoicing. It's pulling forward lots of gains, and any of that positioning that was caught off sides or uninvested is now finding its way back into the market in a hurry. So we've got lots to talk about. Let's get into it here. Actually, before we get into the numbers, jump on our newsletter if you're not already there. Trade Risk is going to be running a Black Friday holiday, Thanksgiving Day sale later this month. This is an early heads up here to get everyone on the same page on board. We always are asked for discounts and promo codes and coupons, and it's always no across the board. This is the one time a year that we do run sales on our TC 2000 store, our trading memberships, our TR150 watch list. So jump on our newsletter. I'll put links somewhere popping up in this video, or it's in the description of this video, so you're on board and you get access to that before it goes live, and that should be coming down the road. So exciting times there. Now let's get into the numbers here. You can see very, very green across the board. Russell 2000, take a look at that, 8.74%. That's good for multiple year highs there in terms of weekly performance. If we take a look at volatility indices, take a look as well. 5, 6, 7 points coming out of the VIX, the Nasdaq Vol Index. This is that fear that was really getting priced in, protection being bought, the uncertainty about the election. It's out of the way, and all of that unwind is now occurring. One thing that we'll also note here is if we look at our smart trend filters, right? We had lots of these sell signals, the weakness before the election. One of the things we talked about last week, right? We said in about a week's time or 2 weeks' time, or in hindsight, the sell-off that we saw yesterday would be so obvious as to either be the perfect opportunity to be adding exposure and buying the dip, or it would be solidified as the starting point for the bigger correction, right? We don't know, we don't have a crystal ball on how these events will unwind in terms of the direction, but we can certainly find the points at which, if you're brave enough to step in, if you have a thesis on the outcome of the election, if you are making those bets, then you certainly are rewarded on the other side. So all of that weakness that we saw last week with our smart trend filters that you could see starting to print those red dots, the rollovers in trends, all kind of gobbled up, reversed sharply, and are now back into the straight up buy signal. So let's take a look quick at the sector performances. You can see once again, green across the board, led by consumer discretionary. You can thank Tesla, Amazon for those gains there. all the way down the list, everything was a winner this week. Now, if we take a look again at our smart trend filters, you can see most of these sectors turning up. The only thing that's kind of lagging right now is healthcare. That's still sort of chopping around, trying to make the turn, but hasn't quite done it. Materials kind of a little soft as well. Staples a little soft, but generally speaking, there are lots of pockets of stocks working right now. If we look at our 52-week highs and lows list, you can see just a big surge in the number of 52-week highs this week. One thing to note is, there are still stocks making 52-week lows. New administration coming in, the market's going to figure out the new policies, what's going to work, what's not going to work. I think most kind of growth economy, the outlook into the future is pretty rosy. The market's clearly pricing that in. However, there are going to be some pockets of weakness. There are going to be some things that in our old administration maybe aren't going to be as accommodative in the new administration. And that's why you're still seeing stocks making 52-week lows right now. We're, again, at a pretty subdued level, but it's not back to the extreme lows that we saw earlier this year or year-to-date lows. All right. Now, if we make a quick pit stop here to Investors Business Daily, they are a sponsor of the show, so thank you, IBD. This is their top 10 of their top IBD 50 stocks. You can see some pretty big winners here. POWL at the top of the list here. Powell Industries, 24% this week. And you can see just lots of double-digit returns. So pick yourself up a IBD digital subscription. We've got a referral link in the description of the show. Support IBD and support the show by doing that. Now, let's get to our dollar index and interest rates slide here. You can see that dollar still liked this week, right? Dollar rallied along with equities. Now, in terms of interest rates, though, they did start to fall. They reversed course here in the last couple of trading days in this week. So again, they've just covered a tremendous amount of ground here. Yields have been rising. It's one of the things we started talking about the last week or so, of just essentially the concern of how rapid the increase was there. But it does feel like this market, kind of got ahead on the election, a re-rating of growth of sorts, and interest rates are kind of getting priced accordingly. That seems to be the logic here. We're going to still want to keep an eye on it. We don't want to see 10-year treasury yield, continuing to rise above, 4 or 5 or anything like that. That starts to get, again, more concerning. But for now, it looks like we've got a little bit of a reversal there. We're going to take a look at those charts. If we take a look here again at some of our commodities, you can see Bitcoin was up big this week, 11%. Oil was also up 1.5%. Everything else was a little bit down this week, including gold. So let's get into some of the charts here. Okay, so if we started off with the S&P 500, let's take a look at the indices here. This is the weekly chart, and again, it's a full-on just springboard here. We had 3 weeks down. Really, it is 2 weeks down. We had 2 weeks of a pullback, and that's kind of what we joked about last time. Is, can we call it a pullback? Yeah, I think we can start to call this a pullback, but boy, was it mild and contained. We essentially got a 2.99, call it 3% pullback off of the highs. And now here we go, making new highs again. Volume picked up. We held over that 5670 line in the sand. And if we go to a daily chart now, you can see this is what the action looked like. Big dollar volume coming in, big gap and go session on Wednesday, follow through on Thursday, follow through on Friday. So a couple of things to note. First off, back to all-time highs. Of course, that kind of speaks for itself. We are in full-on kind of chase mode right now, and this is where things get very uncomfortable to chase because mostly everything is overbought right now. But it is new, kind of rotation. It is pricing in this new administration with potentially a Republican Senate and House backing it, which again was something else the market was probably not pricing in an entire clean sweep for the Republicans. So this is where momentum can certainly persist. We also have a very favorable seasonality tailwind on all of this as well. It's been a strong year-to-date return for stocks. We're coming into the holiday time. We're coming into year end. People are feeling good. They're optimistic, at least from the market perspective. And this is where this momentum can certainly carry on here. It's uncomfortable to perhaps buy and chase, but it is certainly what's dominating right now. So a couple of things basically is, don't lose the discipline. There are still stocks that are breaking out. There are emerging opportunities that are not so extended. Those are things you got to try and find, try and hunt for. If we throw on Bollinger Bands here, again, you can see the S&P 500 cleanly closed and almost traded entirely above its daily 220 Bollinger Band. So again, speaks to some of that frothiness. If we take a look here at the Nasdaq 100, it's basically more of the same. We've been talking about the Nasdaq 100 being the underperformer, the slower of the indices here. And now you can see the QQQ up 5.5%, S&P 500 up 4.75%. So some of that growth, that risk, that tech appetite is coming back now into the market. And of course, we now did clear to a fresh new all-time closing high here for the Nasdaq 100. S&P 500 had been at highs, had already cleared above its July highs. Nasdaq we were waiting on. We did get that this week. So after now going sideways for 3.5 weeks, let's call it, we are getting a week one up breakout to fresh highs here for the Nasdaq 100. So this could be that new leg, that new momentum, that new surge that we needed to see for the Qs. Let's keep an eye on it into the year end. Of course, again, strong momentum behind the move, but it doesn't outshine small caps. The Russell 2000, big move this week, 8.74%. Not quite an all-time high, but we're pretty close. We are very quickly now encroaching on the 2021 highs made 4 years ago. You can see the big dollar volume move in here. You can see this big pattern now into completion. Folks that have been watching this knows that I've been, kind of mostly optimistic here in this sector of the market. The technicals had been lining up for some time now. It felt like the reward to risk would outpace here in the Russell 2000. We needed the election. We needed the election as the catalyst and perhaps the outcome that the market wanted to see. And this was enough to really push a big breakout here for the Russell 2000. So very impressive, extremely stretched in the short term. But I will say there are lots of, there's lots of stocks in this index here. And there are lots of stocks that are perhaps emerging, again, kind of like a week one out of a multi-week or multi-month or multi-year holding pattern that are starting to break out now. And that is why I've been favoring the, kind of reward to risk here in Russell 2000 land. So, congrats to those that enjoyed that push, but that is what we're looking at on the majors. Now, let's take a look here at Bitcoin. Bitcoin, another big winner this week. You can see on our left-hand side, we've got the spot market here, and you can see that's now trading up around 76, 77,000 this week. We clearly and firmly broke out of this consolidation that we had been hanging in basically all year long. So a nice, kind of win there for the Bitcoin bulls. You can see IBIT on the right-hand side. Again, if I throw in a weekly chart, you can see we're making new highs now for Bitcoin. Again, President Trump seems to have a lot of pro-Bitcoin policies, perhaps establishing a Bitcoin strategic reserve, perhaps a bunch of other things, right? We'll see if we can get those actually in place, but for the immediate term, it does seem like regulation, at least in this space, should start to free up, should encourage development builders to come together and now actually conduct business with more clarity, right? That is the hope, and that's what's starting to get priced in here in the particular stocks and, of course, in Bitcoin itself. So nice win there for the Bitcoin bulls. I still have positions here. Our Galahad trading system has positions in here, and we are enjoying the ride for now. Now, I will say that another crypto that we don't usually talk about, but Ethereum, you could track this with iShares ETHA. Take a look at the dollar volume coming in here this week as well. So basically the second largest cryptocurrency by market cap. And you can see this is having a big week as well. Considered a little more aggressively kind of down the risk spectrum from Bitcoin. Certainly has different properties on why you'd want to own it. But this is certainly getting a nice breakout here. I did pick some up for a trade, but I do consider this very different than perhaps Bitcoin in a portfolio. So Ethereum, Bitcoin, Bitcoin. Let's go to Tesla next. Tesla had an epic move this week, up 29%. Look at the volume coming in here, clearing above a major area around this 275, 280 zone and the 300 zone. So it's really just kind of slicing and dicing through it all. Weekly Bollinger Band, daily Bollinger Band here. You can see Tesla's well above. Weekly Bollinger Band well above. So once again, you're getting a lot of FOMO, you're getting a lot of momentum and chasing. But let's keep in mind that the stock really hasn't gone anywhere in 3-4 years. This is very similar to, say, Bitcoin, which topped out 4 years ago around 69,000, and it finally got its breakout. Tesla, you could look at it. I mean, obviously, we're not comparing the same things, but we're looking at just the longevity of the consolidation, and you can look at it from that perspective and say, okay, monthly breakout sideways pattern, and this is starting to get some legs behind it, and could be playing some catch up here as it just knocks on the $1 trillion market cap. So that is something to keep an eye on. Does seem like Tesla is going to be in play here for momentum and traders into year end. Let's look at some other big winners this week. JP Morgan, it faded off of the, towards the tail end of the week, but off of the election, that immediate reaction here, 11.5% move for JPM is massive for that size of a, kind of money center bank. Bank of America. I mean, all these big juggernauts here. You can look at the banking index, just had such a big knee-jerk reaction up. And I think that was probably one of the biggest moves in some of these financials that took me for surprise. The Bitcoin, the Tesla, all that sort of makes sense to me, but some of the moves we saw in financials were really, really big. So that, I think, was most of the big moves. Let's end it here with just some large cap stocks that are moving up. And there's a huge list here. I'm not going to go through them all, but take a look at this list on the left. And if we look at 5-day returns, some of these could be earnings related as well. I mean, look at APP, AppLovin here. I mean, this is a $50 billion company. It's not exactly tiny. It was up 77% this week. We saw Coinbase up basically 50% this week. We saw Palantir up 40%. Again, some of this was earnings. Tesla up 30%. EMR having a huge move as well. So there were just some massive moves out there this week. And I tweeted this out earlier today, but you want to enjoy the ride. You want to enjoy the moves, the momentum. This is the time perhaps to push positions to capture those gains when the times are good. Go get them. But don't let it feed the ego, because right now, this particular week, you could almost throw a dart at the board and stocks, whatever you hit is probably going up, right? And so just don't confuse the skill with what the market is perhaps just doing as a whole right now. And so, let's just keep the discipline in mind as traders, right? You're always still looking for quality A+ setups. You're trying to repeat on reward versus, favorable reward versus risk opportunities. And so just, keep that in mind as we move into the holiday trading time. So I think that is everything I wanted to talk about today. Exciting week for growth and crypto and Tesla and small caps, and we'll see how this all shakes out into year end. Don't forget to jump on the newsletter list, link in the description of this video, to catch all of our Black Friday sales that'll be coming up later this month. And don't forget to support the show with IBD, also with a link in the description of this video. Take care, and we'll see you back here next week.